All right, everyone. I won't repeat the welcoming message again, right? So I'll just let you know quickly about more information about the Rainforest Investigation Network. So the network, we started it in 2021, actually during the pandemic. And it is a flagship program of the Pulitzer Center. I don't think I need to introduce Pulitzer Center. If you do not know what is Pulitzer Center, probably you shouldn't be here, right? So the Rainforest Investigation Network is a year-long fellowship. We started in 2021. So far, this will be the sixth cohort, the 2026. The past 5 years, we already have 65 fellowships. Um, they don't mean we have, it doesn't mean that we have 65 different journalists, because some of the journalists, some of the fellows, they actually became our fellows for 2 years, right? So there are some overlapping. And the year-long fellowship, right, is a fellowship where you are given a year or maybe 10 months to focus on investigations about the drivers or about the problems behind deforestations in the three tropical rainforest regions, which are the Congo Basin, the Amazon, and also Southeast Asia. And for the past 5 years, right, from these 65 fellowships, they published 217 original works or stories and covered, they have like over 740 pieces of coverage, because some story were co-published by multiple publications. And according to our tracking, of course, this is just estimation, all this work reached 16.4 million views. So these are some of the achievement in the past 5 years. And you can see that, for every cohort, we recruit sometimes between eight. I think the maximum we recruited was 13. And then the smallest cohort is 8. For this cohort, the coming cohort 2026, we plan to recruit 10. And these are fellows, they might not be from the Amazon Congo Basin and Southeast Asia, but they are investigating issues in these three regions. You can be based outside of these three regions, but if you want to report on issues and you have the track record and the experience to report on these these three regions, you are able to apply as well, right? We have fellows from, for example, the number 1, 2, 3, the number 3 at top, the first row, is Josephine Moles. She is a journalist with the TBIJ, the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, and based in the UK. During her fellowship, she investigated the oil extraction industry in DRC. So for example, right? So you don't have to be based in these three regions. But of course, when we are selecting our fellows, we'll try to, be balanced. We will definitely select, at least 2 fellows from each region. And then, the rest, we call them international fellows if they are not, based in those 3 regions. Yeah. So what is included in this fellowship? I think it's pretty clear in our how to apply web page, but I'll just quickly go through it, right? First is the financial support, which means that we pay your salary. And then we also provide you with reporting funding. The reporting funding that you can use is up to $10,000 a year. I mean, during your fellowship, right? But it depends on, how much money your investigation need, right? Some of them use much less than 10,000. And these expenses have to be shared with the editors and also get approved by your newsroom as well, right? We don't just like give you 10K and you can just spend whatever you want. But we will go through your investigation needs, and then we will approve the expenses. But you can spend up to $10,000 for your reporting funding, your reporting expenses. Of course, we provide editorial mentoring. So me as well as our executive editor Marina Walker. She was formerly with ICIJ. She has a lot of experience in investigation, and also managing cross-border investigation projects. We also have a whole team of our data and research team. My colleague Fernanda Bufa, she's here as well. She's one of the editors that will be mentoring and supporting the fellows. We also have a data editor and a research editor, as well as a African editor and also other researchers that will be part of the team to support the fellows. And because this is a fellowship not for you just to investigate something, but we want to use it as a opportunity for capacity building. So we have a training program for our fellows. It is pretty intense. You will be doing we'll talk about that later. So then of course is collaboration. You are not just coming as an individual fellow. You are joining a community, a global community of environmental investigative journalists. So we expect you to join the community, interact with your fellows, right? And exchange views and experience, and of course support each other. Because I think most of the investigative journalists, they are quite lonely, and most of them are lone wolf, because you don't get to talk to people often about your investigation. But we are creating the space for you to do that. So you are able to have a safe space to not just talk about your investigation, but also the challenges, the stress that you're facing, right? Maybe the politics that you're having in your newsrooms with your host newsrooms, who knows? But this is a safe space to ask for support, advice, and to learn from each other experience. And our model at Pulitzer Center, we don't just support stories. We also do outreach and education activities after the stories are published. We'll talk about that later. I will show you some examples. And also you'll have access to some of the paid tools and databases that we already subscribe to. These are to assist with your investigation. So I want to talk about this project that I guess we are very proud of, and it really reflects the kind of model that we want to achieve with RIN. This is a story about illegal airstrips in the Amazon forest. And we actually use a new technology that was developed by a organization, our partner called Earth Genome, to use AI and machine learning and satellite imagery to detect airstrips as well as mining operations in the Amazon forest. And this story, it was very, very successful. It was published, I think 4 years ago, actually. It appeared on the first page of New York Times. They look at illegal airstrips in one part of the Brazilian Amazon. And these airstrips are connected to illegal gold mining. So because you are mining gold in the Amazon, you need to transport the gold out of the forest. You need a transportation route. And what they do is that they build very makeshift airstrip, and they use small planes to carry out the golds that they mine. And so we have fellows reporting for the New York Times. It was published on New York Times, but we also have another fellow published. It's a different story. He looked at a different part of Brazil using the same methodology, the same data set, right? Data set about the airstrips as well as the mining operations. And this story was published in The Intercept Brazil, right? It's also about illegal gold mining and the airstrips. And then the same methodology, using satellite imagery and machine learning, also used by another fellow to do illegal gold mining story in Venezuela. So we have Brazil and then we have Venezuela. So you can see this, and of course, these fellows, they talk to each other, to share about the challenges, about the methodology, the data, and how do they do ground reporting, okay? And later, this technology, we found it that, okay, if it is able to benefit 3 or 4 fellows, maybe we should build it as an infrastructure that can benefit more journalists. And after the fellows publish a story, we continue to work with Earth Genome, and we develop it into a publicly available tool. It's called the Amazon Mining Watch. So this tool uses machine learning and satellite imagery to track mining operations in the whole Amazon forest. So if you now go to this website, you're able to see the data for the past, I think for the past 4 or 5 years. Okay. And you're able to download the data. And we are continuing to update this database. And from there, more fellows and also our Pulitzer Center grantees use this tool for their investigations. And now we are expanding the tool to Africa, and we are going to call it Africa Mining Watch, right? So this tool will be again published in another maybe 1 or 2 months. It will be publicly available as well for everyone to use. And for the Africa, we are working with Code for Africa to make sure that it is able to reach the journalists in Africa who might want to use it. So these are the kind of, in this fellowship, we are not just supporting individual project and individual journalists. We want to build a community, and second, we want to build infrastructure for investigative journalism and for environmental reporting. So, this came from the fellows. Actually, it was the fellow who brought us the idea to ask us, in his proposal, he was saying that I would like to use machine learning and AI to detect illegal gold mining. Is that possible? And from that proposal, we found Earth Genome, and then we facilitated the collaboration between the fellow and Earth Genome. And later we found that the same database can be used by many other journalists. Yeah. So just to give you, and the whole project has been very impactful. It has led to actions by government in some countries, and the technology is still now being used by other newsrooms in Amazon, and now we are moving it to Africa as well. Okay. We also want to achieve impacts from our fellowship. So I'll just show you some of those impacts in the past 5 years. The most recent one, our 2025 cohort, the fellow, his name is Flavio. Flavio, he is a journalist with Folha de São Paulo, a largest newspaper in Brazil. So he did a investigation into the Congress Fund, the Brazilian Congress Fund. From the open data or from the government data, he was able to identify that some of those funds has been used by some congressmen to fund the deforestation in Amazon. The fund was used to buy machinery to open new roads and to deforest the protected Brazilian Amazon. And after this story was published, actually not one story, he published a series of stories on the same issue. A group of NGOs petitioned the Brazilian court to ask the court to ban the congressional fund from being used to fund deforestation. And the court actually made a decision in March last month to say that going forward, the Congress cannot use the funding. I mean, the congressional funding cannot be used for anything that can cause environmental harm. So this is a direct real-world impact from one of our fellows. We are not just looking at the societal impacts in terms of laws, in terms of policies, but we are also looking at individual and the organizational level, right? So I'll give you another example. So Yao Hua Law, he is a Malaysian journalist, environmental journalist. He was our fellows for 2 consecutive years because he was very good. His investigation focused on deforestation in Malaysia. And He has done like I think more than 5 or 6 investigations throughout the 2 years of his fellowship. And those investigation has led to government actions. Government actually in one of the project, the government actually stopped the project because the indigenous people use his report to start legal action against the government and the developers. And eventually, he won the Sigma Awards for data journalism in 2023. And he is the first Malaysian to win that award. And also, this is not an award for a team. This is an award for one individual. So it's the most prestigious award for data journalism globally. And his outlet, his news publication called Makaranga, has become a leading environmental news portal in the region. And he has become a trainer and also a mentor for many other environmental journalists in the region, not just Malaysia, but here as well as Indonesia and Philippines. And recently, this year, he is now at Harvard University because he has been selected as a Nieman Fellow. So you can see how the RIN fellowship really changed his career and also, uplifted his organization, his publication. So just now I talked about that we'll have a lot of training for the fellows because we want to do capacity building and partnership. So for example, in 2025, we have 16 sessions of training covering 23 hours. And which means that the first 6 months of the fellowship, right, you basically have a training every week. And one of the weeks, right, there are 4 weeks in a month, 3 weeks we will have training. And then the last week is usually the fellows meeting. So we do have monthly fellow meetings every month. And the other 3 weeks, we use it for training. The training topics covering from like satellite imagery to how to follow the money to data visualization. We also include other non-technical training, for example, mental health training, for example, how to do engagement and outreach. Yeah. So the support that we provide for our fellows, right? You can see that these are 2 examples. One is is a map that goes together with the story. The second one is what we call a storytelling interface for the story. So these are the kind of support that you will get from our team, right? We usually encourage fellows to make the map by themselves, right? If they're able to do it, and we provide training for them. But in some cases, for example, the storytelling was made by me because this is a much complicated process, and you need to do some coding to make this happen. So in some cases, when we have the bandwidth to do it, we also help fellows to do this kind of presentation for the story. So in terms of the support, we have we call it a data hour, which means that we have one-on-one meeting or call with you to solve some of your investigation, methodologies or investigation challenges. For example, let's say you want to track the products, let's say rare earth mining in Myanmar. You think that it is being exported to let's say China. How do you track who are the buyers, sellers, and things like that? Then we might sit down and discuss with you and try to figure out a solution. So we call that data hour. We also have a one-on-one tutorial. This is more like if you want to learn a tool. Let's say you want to learn how to do OSINT on social media. Then we can do one-on-one tutorial with you. We also have some recorded video tutorials, data visualization. I show you like these are the 2 examples. Sometimes our researchers will also do some research for you, and of course we want you to learn how to do research, right? Using our tools, using our methodologies. But in some cases, if you are not able to find what you want to find, we might be able to help. And then of course we have access to paid databases and tools. For example, we have access to 3-meter resolution satellite imagery from planet. We have the access to Sayari, which is a corporate record database as well as trade records, right? We have access to Import Genius and Abrams Wiki. These two are also trade data platforms. We have access to Tianyancha, which is a corporate record database in China for Chinese companies. And of course, we don't mind to, subscribe to new database, based on your demands. If you need to use those databases or tools, they are key to your investigations, we are happy to work out how to support you with those. And we also have, just now I mentioned Earth Genome. This is a group of geospatial expertise. They developed the Amazon Mining Watch as well as the Africa Mining Watch. So we have a long-term partnership with them. So they have been supporting some of our fellows with their investigation as well. Apiary is our internal database. We have been collecting data from our previous fellows. Remember, we have 65 fellowships, right? So these fellows, when they did their investigations, they also store their data into our internal database. This is not public. So people outside of Pulitzer are not able to access them, but all our fellows are able to access them and upload data. And our former fellows, if you graduated from the fellowships, you have continued access to this database as well. Previously, it was called RIN data. Some of you might remember that. Now we just rebrand it and we call it Apiary. Okay, a little bit about the distribution and outreach. So I mentioned earlier that you have 12 months for the fellowship, but we would like you to publish the story in the 10 or 11 month so that you have 1 or 2 months and we can do some outreach activities for you. So our model at Pulitzer Center, we don't just stop at the publication of the story. And then the rest is like, whatever, will let it, happen. No, we want to be very intentional about, how do we reach our target audience through specific distribution channels or through some engagement or outreach activities. And to do this, we actually have an international education and outreach team in Pulitzer Center. It is as big as our editorial team. So what they do is that they connect the stories or they connect the fellows with university, with NGOs, with communities, right? Or with students, right? To promote and to convert your stories into other kind of materials. For example, some of our stories were converted into lesson plans in classroom in the US and also in other universities. So example is that, this is in DRC, we actually converted, the story about Gloria. Gloria, she is our former RIN fellow. She did investigation, she did some investigations in Africa, and we converted the stories into a comic book and distributed, to students. Another fellow, Bruna Bornowski, after she finished publishing her story, she did an online workshop, to share her methodologies on how to investigate financial instruments. We have Yao Hua. I mentioned earlier that he is now a Nieman Fellow in Harvard. So while he was there, we arranged him to visit universities and talk to students about his investigation. And the first one is actually we also produce like short videos and help you to promote your stories on social media. So these are the different ways of us trying to help you to amplify your stories and help you to reach your targeted audience. We have done other activities like art exhibition, photo exhibition, film fest, etc., etc. And you can also suggest to us like, okay, I think I want to reach the policymaker. I want to do something like that, some activities, right? Then our IEO team, our International Outreach and Education team, they have their expertise is in doing outreach activities, so they can discuss with you and support you in doing that. Right. So this is my last slide. Yep. What we are looking for. first track record of investigative experience. And we want your proposals to examine the systems instead of isolated cases, right? This is important. And we want you to be ambitious and try to, achieve the maximum potential impacts that you think can be achieved. Remember that this is a 12-month fellowship. So you should be very ambitious because imagine you have 10 or 11 months to work on an investigation, right? So this is a luxury that many investigative journalists don't have. And of course, you want to be ambitious. You want to look at something big, something that could take you 10 months to finish. And we always welcome innovative and data-driven methodologies. If you look at the newsletter from Nieman Lab today, it was published today. It is about geospatial AI, how it reinvent the rainforest beat. The whole article is actually about how Rainforest Investigation Network, RIN, is doing that, right? The Nieman Lab interviewed our former fellows and our former director, Gustavo, and also talk about the Africa Mining Watch, right? To talk about how our fellowship transform the rainforest investigation beat using technology, using AI, right? So we want to continue to push the envelope on this front. And we really rely on the fellows, right, or the applicants to come with good applications, with innovative, nothing is too big for us. You just come with your crazy ideas, and if we select, then we will figure it out together with you, right? And of course, cross-border collaboration. This is something that we always like to see between the fellows. Yeah. So if you are able to include some, cross-border collaboration in your proposals, that will be a plus point. But again, you don't have to have everything in your application, right? You might want to focus on a domestic issue, which is fine, yeah. So we are not asking you to have all the elements, but these are some of the things that we are looking for. So some key dates, yeah. Applications close on May 22nd. So don't wait until the last minute. I don't know how many applications we are able to handle with our system. Should be okay. But my advice is always don't wait until the last minute. You don't know what would happen. Maybe blackout, maybe your internet is down. And in June and July, we will start to call the shortlisted candidates for interviews. And we will announce the selected fellows in July. And on the 1st of August, we hope to begin the fellowship if everything goes smooth. All right, that's all from me. I think I've taken probably too much time, so I will pass it to Jerry. Feel free to put your questions in the chat box. I will look at them down now while Jerry will present.
Good morning, afternoon, and evening. Yeah, my name is Jerry Flynn. I'm a staff writer with Mongabay. I'm based in Bangkok, Thailand, after being quite discourteously ejected from Cambodia last year, after essentially what started with the Rainforest Investigations Network. I began investigating illegal logging in Cambodia through RIN, and shortly afterwards was offered a full-time job with Mongabay, where I am today. And it turns out the Cambodian government doesn't like that. So that was the end of my time there. I'm just going to start my presentation, and I'll try and breeze through it just so that we can get to the questions. Okay. So yeah, I mean, I think like what Keng said, one of the really important things with RIN is as an opportunity, it gives you the time and the space and the resources to focus on an investigation that you just otherwise typically wouldn't have, especially as a freelancer, like I was at the time when I started. If you don't file stories, you don't get paid, and that's problematic when it comes to looking at these bigger, complicated kind of systems. And so for our project, which is based in Cambodia, we focused predominantly on the Cardamom Mountains, which is a beautiful stretch of rainforest that lies between the border of Cambodia and Thailand. And we looked predominantly at how the development of hydropower dams was giving rise to an illegal logging operation, which we then established, we didn't know at the time of applying, we then established was actually operating out of a prison and was using prison labor to make furniture out of illegally logged wood, which was very on brand for Cambodia. But we also looked at a variety of different issues while we were working on this, as new stories kind of came up and new leads arose. So I think one thing to bear in mind is that your application and what you end up actually producing, there's probably going to be some difference, or at least there was for me. I think the investigation expanded quite significantly in scope once we started learning a lot more about what was happening, not just in the cardamoms, but across Cambodia. But again, yeah, having the time and the space and even the money, because often environmental investigations are not cheap. You have to be able to travel to remote places. You often, if like me, I'm obviously not Cambodian, you require a full team of people in that, a photographer, a translator, in some cases a videographer. So, it's really helpful to be able to have that volume of resources. And I think what it's particularly good for is if you were looking at like what Keng mentioned about systems, if you want to try and unpack complicated topics that have maybe either been not reported on at all, or have been touched on but as isolated cases. So we started looking at how the garment sector in Cambodia was driving deforestation in protected areas. And basically what we found was a lot of garment factories in Cambodia were not using electricity to boil water, to iron and dye clothes. They were instead burning wood. And a lot of that wood was being logged illegally. But of course, this has been a long-standing issue in Cambodia, but no one had ever really stopped to look at the actual supply chain of it. It had often been a kind of, a daily news story about maybe a logger getting arrested and saying he was logging to provide firewood for a factory. So again, to have that length of time and the level of support that comes in the form of people like Keng at the Pulitzer Center, that's really helpful. And they will push you. They will make you go deeper into a story even when you think you're done. You're probably not. There's always room to kind of keep digging and keep going and just make it that little bit more worthwhile. And again, I think what Keng said about the training being intense is true. When I started my RIN fellowship in 2022, I didn't really know much about geospatial data or how to use it. I studied literature. I'm a words guy. I'm not a data guy. But this is my QGIS of Cambodia today. There's a lot going on there. It's pretty messy. But it's really through RIN and through the guidance provided during that fellowship that I learned how to be able to use this kind of data and use these kind of programs. And I use QGIS, like geospatial data and satellite imagery, for almost every story and at almost every stage of the story now, from researching ideas for stories to planning reporting trips to monitoring areas once we've gone and done some reporting on the ground and have left and want to see how things have developed, even producing graphics and maps or charts that are going to be published in Mongabay with a story. So the skills that you learn really are quite indispensable. They've stuck with me, and I think very, very valuable. So definitely worth paying attention. It can be tempting to skip some of the training sessions because if, like me, these things were at like 9 p.m. on a Thursday or something, yeah, it's less than ideal. But honestly, they are very, very worthwhile. All of the speakers are extremely qualified, and you can really learn a lot from these people. Uh, and I mean, the people at the end of the day really are probably the best part about the fellowship. You get to pick the brains of a whole bunch of your peers from around the world, and you might not think that someone from a completely different continent is going to have any ideas that would really help you with your investigation. But honestly, they're great people to bounce ideas off, and the majority of these people I've stayed in touch with. A lot of them now actually work with me at Mongabay. So yeah, you do end up making a lot of really good friends that you can then kind of catch up with when you are anywhere else in the world, which is a nice treat. But that's everything from me. I'm kind of speed running it a little here, just so that there's time for everyone to ask questions. My email is there, my Twitter and Instagram as well. But yeah, if you have any other questions or if you want to reach out, feel free. I'm always happy to help anytime I can. And on that note, I'll hand it back to you, Keng.
Thank you, Jerry. Yeah, so there are some questions in the chat box. Feel free to also if you want to know more about the experience of being a fellow, you can ask, then Jerry can answer them. So I'll just try to tackle the two questions. One is that you're based in Sodit. You say you're based in Nigeria. Yes. So we don't really focus on Nigeria. But if the story is about the rainforest in Nigeria, we are happy to consider it. Yeah. So yeah, please, send us your story. And if you can look at, the stories about Nigeria and probably, Cameroon because it's next to each other, right? If there's a cross-border angle for it, that would be a plus point. So for example, we have a fellow who is based in Uganda. So but he looks at the cross-border trading of timber logs. Yeah, I think if I'm not mistaken, it was Uganda and it was between Uganda and DRC and Kenya. So like because the timber supply chain cross over the three different countries, right? So yes, don't be afraid if you are based in Nigeria. We definitely welcome that. The second question from Zhao Ying, it's do we have to focus on one of the regions? No. So you can focus in more than one regions or three regions if you want. But I think your reporting trip might be tricky. If you want to cover the all three regions, you might want to fly over there, or maybe you can find local reporters to work with you in other regions. That is possible as well. Yeah. We do have projects in the past about like supply chain. For example, from one region, the critical minerals was mined and then exported to another region. So that's how you connect different regions, Yeah, so we don't just limit to one region, to be short. Ferdinand, I'm reading your very long comment. Okay, what elements should be avoided? Huh, good questions. Um, I don't think there is anything that like, maybe there is. Okay. Things that like quickly turn us away is if we don't see very strong track record from the applicant. So the application form will ask you to pick three best stories from published in the past, I think, 5 years. So you have to convince us that you have the experience to do investigation and preferably environmental investigation and also in rainforest, related to rainforest. So that is one. Second thing is that you must have a commitment letter from a newsroom who promise to not just to publish your story, but also to host you, which means that it will provide editorial support to you. So maybe Jerry, you can talk about more about like how you work with the newsrooms during your fellowship.
Yeah, yeah. So I think yeah, choosing those three articles was incredibly difficult for me at the time because I don't think I had three rainforest stories, and I think one of them in my application was like for an investigation into like illegal fishing. Um, and so that still worked for me, but working with the newsroom is I was worried it was going to be quite complicated managing the expectations of the Pulitzer Center and editors at Mongabay, but actually it was pretty seamless. The communication was really easy. So once you've got that letter of support, it probably works best if it is with a newsroom that you've worked with before, where you know the editor and you've got that relationship in place, just so you know what the working style is going to be like and the communication is going to be like. I think that helps. Maybe one other thing to avoid just in general with the application is being overly vague. I'd say try to make it a very specific application of like what, and make sure show that you've done enough research and pre-reporting, or as much as you can, without spending too much of your own money or time. But yeah.
Yeah, so that's the key. Yeah, do your pre-reporting, convince us that you really know about the issue and you are discovering something that has not been widely reported before, or you are going much deeper into the issue that nobody has done it before. Yeah. And some of the criteria I already showed it in my last slide, is about, we welcome innovative data-driven methodologies, cross-border collaboration, be ambitious, at the same time, be specific. We want you to be ambitious, but at the same time, give us specific details. For example, that, who are the individuals or the companies that you want to investigate. Don't just tell us that I want to investigate the government, right? Or I want to investigate the industry. You have to tell us that which companies specifically, name the companies, right? And tell us what have you done, about the companies. Maybe you already received some information about the companies, right? So be as specific as possible. The next question is a full-time fellowship. If you are freelancers, are you allowed to work? We don't encourage you to work on other side assignments because we are going to cover your salary. Usually we will look at your region, your experience, for us to determine how much is your scarce salary. We will also talk to your newsroom, and of course we negotiate with you, right? How much is a reasonable amount? The purpose is to make sure that you don't have to worry about your how to pay the bills in a 12 months, right? We want you to focus on your investigation. And this is for us, right? The feedback that we get from the fellows, the previous fellows, is that the more you're able to focus on the fellowship, the better you are able to produce and the more you're able to learn from the fellowship. So this is really I would say a once in a lifetime opportunity. Imagine you have 12 months and your bills have been taken care of, right? And then you're able to focus on one story. So if you still want to do many other things, right, you are not making the full use of this fellowship. Jerry, you want to talk about that? Like, how do you balance between, I don't know, how do you see like working on a fellowship as well as taking other works? Did you do that, during your fellowship?
I think in the early days I had like some stories I needed to finish off for Mongabay that were kind of like halfway finished when the Pulitzer accepted my application. But yeah, I didn't think I did any freelancing on the side, because it was the most money I'd ever received in journalism at that time in my career. So it was yeah, it was good in that respect. But it does go against the like kind of journalistic prerogative of, you're constantly on the lookout for stories, and you do kind of have to turn that part off in your brain a little bit, which was quite difficult for me in the beginning. Yeah, it's just sort of, and especially when it can feel sometimes like with the investigation that progress is going quite slowly, but I mean, knowing that you've got a year and that you don't have to rush it, and that there's not really going to be, until maybe month 9 or maybe month 8, there's not going to be an editor breathing down your neck asking like, where is it? And like Keng said, that your bills are paid and you're able to kind of just focus on one thing and do a really good job of it, and take the time to learn the skills, in the training, and to make the most of the network itself. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily recommend trying to do much else on the side at all, really.
I mean, I mean, it's a full-time fellowship. We don't totally ban you from other newsroom responsibilities that you have. We understand that if you are not a freelancer, you're in the newsrooms, probably when, a breaking news happens in the newsrooms and all hands on deck. In that kind of situation, you will be pulled in, to do some reporting. We can accept that. We know I mean, we are journalists as well. I work in several newsrooms, so we do understand that kind of situations. But the focus is that, the more committed you are, the more time you spend in this fellowship, you're able to get more out of it. And we always tell the fellows that we are trying to help you to produce the best version of your story during the fellowship. Something that you would be very proud of, and something that could transform your career after you publish a story. Yeah. Any other questions? Feel free to unmute, and ask questions, or you have some views you want to share. This is the opportunity. We have another 8 minutes to go. Or there's something that you want me to elaborate, or show my slides again, or maybe a show of hands. How many of you plan to apply? You can just, I think you're able to raise hands, right? How many of you plan to apply? Just one, two hands. Three hands. Three out of 12. Oh, Elham say in the future. Of course, we will, I mean, we secure the fund for the next 5 years. So we should be able to have the 10 cohort if everything goes well. We have four hands. Okay, okay. That's great. I think yeah. Ini Ecot say that send my slides again. Which one do you want to look at? I'll just share my screen while I answer the other questions. Uh, yeah, let me know which one do you want to look at, or I'm actually trying to quickly go through the slides, and if to see if I can I can share the slides with you directly. Yeah, I think I can share it. There's nothing. Let me just share it with you. Yeah, I think that's fine. Nothing confidential here. All right, I'll just put it in the chat. Okay, let's look at the few questions. Min Tran, you have the questions of would preference go to people who have already had experience working with Play Center, like receiving grants? No, 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 no. You don't have to be a grantee to be able to apply. So if you are a grantee, they are good and bad about it. Okay. if your project with us before as a grantee went really well, and of course we would look at your previous projects. We would check our database to see whether you have applied any funding from us before, whether you have done any reporting. And of course, we will look at how good was the report was the project, right? But if the project is less good, yes, it might, and of course, it will affect your application, right? Because that is your track record with us, right? So it could be good and bad, yeah. If you have like a smaller project, feel free to apply for our grant first. Yeah. Or you don't think that you have the experience or the track record for this fellowship, you can start to do that by applying for our grant. We have Rainforest reporting grant as well. It's the same, but it's not a fellowship. It's like a short term grant. You can do a project for 2 or 3 months. You get apply for a few $1,000 of budget. Yeah. So if you just check our website, how to apply for grant. There are a lot of details there. Any other questions? We have 4 more minutes. I'll just wait. Okay. All right. Everyone just say thank you. Jerry, you have anything to add?
I'm just going to put my email address in the chat. So then if anyone does have any questions later on that they want to know, whether it's about Rin or about anything else, if there's anything I can help with journalistically, then feel free to reach out. It's not a problem. Yeah, no, I think other than that, good luck with your applications as you're thinking of doing it. Honestly, it's probably the best thing that's happened to my career. So I 10 out of 10 recommend it.
Okay, so before I close this session, just want to remind everyone that after this session, if you still have questions, feel free to reach out to my team. I'll put the email in the chat box as well. So just send your inquiry, your questions to Rin at pulitzercenter.org, the email. And not just me, a few of our team will get your email and we'll get back to you, right? Because I might be on leave end of this week. So, we use this email so that, more than one person will look at your email. So we hope to see your applications. And yeah, if you have any questions after this, if anything pops up, you want to reach out to us, feel free to email us. We will get back to you as soon as possible. And then the last reminder is that deadline is May 22nd. So don't wait until the last minute. And you might need some time to get the commitment letter or the support letter from the newsrooms that will be able to publish your story or to host you if you are a freelancer. So that might take some time, right? So you might want to start working on that first before you submit the application. All right, everyone. If there's no more questions, thank you so much for coming. And I hope to see you in our, next online events or in any of the conferences. If you see me or Jerry, please come and say hi to us. All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
All righty. Cheers, guys.